Good morning, everyone, and I'd like to thank Lucy for the invitation and the ACU and Jay and everyone for the opportunity to speak here. It's wonderful the work that you're doing and very inspiring. I'm going to talk about empowering development and the actions that the bank has taken and try to conclude on why open, and in my particular case as the publisher for the World Bank, by open I mean open access, why open is right for development. So, brief outline, this is all about the strategic decisions behind the bank's decision to implement an open agenda. I'll talk a little bit about the context, the mission of the World Bank, and the traditional approach to economic development. I'll talk about the World Bank's open agenda, its access to information policy, open data, open access. I'm going to give a few highlights from a reader survey we concluded this summer, which I believe validates our decision to move into open access. And then I'll conclude with a summary of why I think open is right for development. And I'll say also I'm going to try to rush through as much as I can so that hopefully there'll be a little bit of discussion at the end. So the World Bank mission. The World Bank has articulated two goals, and these were basically endorsed by our development committee at the annual meetings this weekend. So this is bright new, but so it is to end extreme poverty by 2030 and to boost shared prosperity. And these things have very specific definitions. With respect to end extreme poverty, the goal is to decrease the percentage of people living on less than $1.25 a day to no more than 30% by the year 2030. And in order to do that, just to give you an example, in 7 years by 2020, the extreme poverty rate has to be cut in half between what it is today by 2020 in order to reach the goal of 3% by 2030. And that rate of cutting poverty in half has to happen again and then nearly again a third time in order to reach the goal. Boosting shared prosperity is basically getting people to $1.26 isn't the goal. And living on $1.25 obviously is utter extreme poverty. The goal of boosting shared prosperity is ensuring that the benefits of growth go disproportionately to the bottom 40% of the population. And this is to create social safety nets so that people don't fall back into extreme poverty and to share the benefits of development. So the traditional approach to development, this basically entailed the transfer of resources from the rich countries, which we call the North, to the poorer countries in what we've traditionally called the South. And these were usually accompanied by policy prescriptions. That's an important point. We were telling people what was right, what they had to do in order to move along the development. The development institutions, i.e. the World Bank and others that channeled these transfers were opaque. They had little transparency of what they financed and the results they achieved. And the engagement in the developing countries was typically with the government authorities, very little actions with the citizens who were the ultimate beneficiaries of development assistance. So I found this cartoon on Google and I thought it was really to the point. But basically, when I joined the bank in 1993, 20 years ago, the 50 Years is Enough campaign was really picking up steam. And the reason was because of the traditional approach to development, which I described. The bank, the IMF, other institutions going there and bringing the resources, but saying, in order to have these resources, you must do this. And it's fair to say that at the time, there was a backlash, there was a campaign against the World Bank and the IMF, 50 years is enough. And I'm not suggesting in any way that we've totally crossed the bridge, but I do think that things have progressed and things are better. So that was then, this is now, and the point is that openness is the new normal. These are from the website of Publish What You Fund, and unfortunately in 2012, the bank fell from first place to second place in terms of transparency and openness with respect to what we fund just below DFID. And I believe we'll slip another slot this year, and it has to do with our ability to put the information out there in ways that allows others to use it. It's more about the technical aspects of what we're disclosing and how we're disclosing it, not about whether we're willing to disclose. And this is a big subject in the bank, and there's a lot of work going on to ensure that whatever shortcomings there are in how we make this information available are addressed so that we are the most transparent institution that we can be. So the bank's open agenda, the intent is to be open about what we know. That concerns me directly as a publisher. To be open about what we do, open about how we work, and to promote openness generally. Now, what does that mean for publishing right now in terms of ending extreme poverty and boosting shared prosperity? The bank as an institution made the decision 2-3 years ago that its knowledge and data are global public goods. So that basically means we will make that information available in the best manner that we can. So there are 3 pillars to the bank's open agenda: access to information, open data, and open access. I'm going to describe them, the first 2 very briefly. I'll spend a little bit more time in open access because that's the area that I'm responsible for. So access to information went into effect in July 1st of 2010. It replaced a former policy called the disclosure policy. And the disclosure policy basically said everything is confidential except for a short list of documents that we will disclose. The access to information policy turned that on its head and said everything is open except for a short list of documents that will remain confidential, for example, HR records, things of that nature. It's modeled after the US and Indian Freedom of Information Acts. It has 5 principles, which I won't read. But since we implemented this policy, millions of documents have been downloaded. We have, and these are not publications, not research, not what the open access is about. But we've also moved beyond that, and I've taken out a number of slides in the interest of brevity. We're making information about where bank projects are through something called mapping for results, where you can drill down and get information at the project level and more granular bits of information. We're disclosing, as of July 1st this year, on a quarterly basis, at the end of the quarter, information about all contracts that were issued for a value of greater than $250,000. Those are some of the examples of the access to information. In terms of open data, it actually went live a little bit before access to information, although because it all happened very quickly. And we have Hans Rossel to thank for that, if you know Hans. Basically, our data is now legally open, and it's technically open. Legally in the sense that you can reuse our data, technically in the sense that it's available through an API and through other means. We make it available in 5 languages. There's all sorts of information. There are a lot of data visualization tools and mapping tools and so forth. Although I must say, it's not clear that we'll be able to continue to invest in that sort of in those sorts of tools, and whether perhaps it's the industries in the publishing industry and others that would develop those tools, but we will continue to make the data available. So the open access policy is the part that I'm responsible for. It became effective in July 2012, although we launched our open access repository 3 months before that in April of 2012. It applies to the manuscripts and the associated data sets, and to journal articles, books, and chapters. Most of the content, or a lot of the content, are things that we as an institution publish. The journal articles includes both those that are in the bank's 2 journals, but also journal articles that bank researchers published in peer-reviewed journals, say a number of organizations, Elsevier, Springer, Taylor and Francis, and others. If we publish it, it is immediately available in the open access repository and under a Creative Commons attribution license. If it's published externally, whether it's a journal article or a chapter, we use the Green OA model, and the working paper version, at least of the journal articles, are usually available immediately under CC BY, and the accepted author manuscript under a somewhat more restrictive, no derivative, no non-commercial CC license. And the centerpiece of the open access policy is our open access repository, which we call the Open Knowledge Repository. So a little note here about how we won an award and the reasons for it. But this is the most recent view of the page. And I've circled the site statistics because I'm going to talk a little bit about those statistics to come back to the question about why open is right for development. So these are the most popular items, and this is a screenshot from about 3-4 days ago, in the repository. And we see that we reached the 2 millionth download. It's now probably up to 2,025,000 or so. But the 2 millionth download was reached on Wednesday night in Frankfurt during our reception at Frankfurt. And I was there with Rob Cornford, and we were about to make an announcement, but we chose not to. Now, I'm going to focus for a second, and I forgot to bring the book. I had it in the hotel. On this the most downloaded item, which is a book called The New Microfinance Handbook. Now, that book was published in February of this year. It's a tome, 532 pages. We've sold 855 copies, which is, it's what it should be, I guess. But it's been downloaded close to 30,000 times. I couldn't give away 30,000 copies in print, and it would cost a fortune to do so. Now, where has that book been downloaded? 1/3 of the downloads are in the US, but 13 of the top 20 countries where the downloads originate are developing countries, and those are the ones that are starred. And I apologize for the size here. I did this in my Mac, and it doesn't translate well all the time. It is surprising that Bangladesh is not here, but India is, and you see the downloads by country. To me, that's a pretty remarkable result, 30,000 copies of a book that was published in February, 530 pages. But let's look at something that's a bit more dry, the sort of thing that not even your mother would read. And that would be a particular case here, a technical assistance report about work done in Vietnam on urbanization. It's in our economic and sector work. The bank does a lot of this. Some of the best economic and sector work comes to us and we publish as books. Most of it is gray literature where 25 copies were printed, delivered to the client, a copy for your mom who wouldn't read it. And anecdotally, the feedback that I always got was that this stuff didn't have a life. It didn't really get used. So this particular one is the most downloaded piece of ESW in the repository. It was published in November 2011, so the publication predates our repository by about 1.5 years. It's not a small volume, it's 264 pages. I don't have the actual data, but very few copies were printed. And there was no way to systematically disseminate these other than they went into another repository that the bank has, which has 600,000 documents, and finding a document there, good luck. The difference with the Open Knowledge Repository is that we are OA compliant, OAI initiative, and so it's relatively easy to find our stuff. And it's been downloaded 4,200 times since it went live sometime after the repository was done. And here are the top 20 countries downloading the report, including 1,300 copies in Vietnam. You can't, it's an amazing result given what the reality was before we went open access. These are downloads by country, and we see that 1/3 of the downloads are in the US, although having said that, 12 of the top 20 countries in terms of the number of downloads are in the developing world, as are 38 of the top 50. So although I find it more and more difficult to consider China a developing country, I'm going to drill down into China. And by the way, what I'm doing here, any of you can do. You can do it right now. And that 2,019,000 will be a higher number. So this is what is in China. This is what has been downloaded. It includes 5 of our flagship reports. The World Development Report, which some of you may know, is the top downloaded document. But it also includes 7 reports that look at the experiences of other countries. So we've got 2 that are focused on Brazil, 1 on Eritrea, 1 on Vietnam, and 3 that are multi-country experiences. And then this one I really like, a working paper called Weaponomics, the global market for assault rifles. I'm not sure why that's of interest in China, but it was interesting to me. I should say that having 2 million downloads now, I'm going to speed up because I have to quit. So we're doing things for author profiles. We're working with our authors to let them know about the policy and ensure that we have compliance. We have an agreement with Elsevier so that if you go to the website to publish a document, everything there, also with Taylor and Francis and with others. So are we proud of our repository? Although there's no one in the picture, this was just before when we knew we were going to reach the 1 millionth download. It happened precisely 365 days from the launch. So in exactly 1 year, we had our millionth download, so we threw a party. But we took that banner, we're not re-putting it up, but we've now gone a year and a half. We're up to 13,000 publications and 2 million downloads. I'm going to have to speed through this very quickly. We did a survey. We have 149 responses. That's an 11% response rate. There are some methodological limitations, which I don't have time to get into. But it's a tracking survey. This is the 4th time that we've done it. The responses were almost 50% live in low and lower middle income countries, the sorts of countries that INASPA and others are trying to serve. And the people who responded were a diverse group, but there was a concentration of academics, researchers, and analysts. So this is what has to do with open access. The question was, are you aware of the following World Bank publishing practices? That our publications are free and open, that we provide free and open development, and that you can reuse them and redistribute them free of charge. So we asked those questions. Now this is the important point that comes later. The question was, does the fact that the World Bank provides free access and allows free reuse and free distribution of its publications, even commercially, make you more likely to use World Bank publications? And 75% or 74% said that they were more likely to use them. And to me, that validates. That validates our decision to go open access. So why is open right for development? It increases transparency, accountability, and results. I think it shifts the power boundary between states and citizens. It promotes citizen engagement and collaboration in making development outcomes, managing development outcomes, excuse me. It leverages multiple sources of knowledge, networking, and new ideas. It enhances momentum of technology, social media interaction, and computing innovations. And I get to come to conferences like this and not wear my tie. Thank you very much. If I can get in a quick plug, which I mentioned, Open Access Week is next week. We're hosting the kickoff event in Washington at the World Bank. It'll be webcast to college campuses around the world. It's sponsored by Spark, the Public Library of Science, and the World Bank. And the PLUS ASAP awards will be announced there. Thank you very much.